This is the Excel import training for the National FFA Living to Serve data collection and reporting system. So in our scenarios today, the Excel forms or grants were entered into the database. An Excel form was created and sent out to the chapters. The chapters have completed that information and have sent it back to National FFA. I would strongly recommend that as those forms come back, that they are put in a folder and identified by chapter name or chapter number, whatever makes sense to distinguish them and keep them in one location. I would also suggest creating in that same place a folder named Imported or something along those lines so that we have a mechanism to prevent uploading or importing the same Excel file more than once. For some aspects, that's not an issue. For other aspects, the partner information, some of the other outcome information, it'll create duplicate entries and the reporting will not be accurate. So I have that here. The two chapters that we set up have submitted their forms. I put them in the same folder, named them by their chapters, and created a imported folder to put them into once they're done. So before we start importing, I'm going to open the Excel document and just spot check that everything looks okay. So the kinds of things that you're looking for, you can start on the National Check tab. Make sure that everything says that it matches. If it doesn't match, you have a couple options. You can make assumptions on their behalf and identify additional students as no race identified and evenly split genders, or you can send it back to the chapter and say you need to correct this before we can accept the outcomes that you submitted. The other pieces to check are to make sure that they've identified a status for each of the community issues or each of the projects that have been identified for them, and just look through the partners to make sure that that some have been entered, that there isn't extraneous information. For example, they've deleted information but still have future marked as yes or no, or clear that out for them just to keep the data cleaner, and that the rest of the document is complete. If there are missing sections, then obviously you're going to want to follow up with the chapter to make sure that that all gets completed. Once that's done, and so we're going to assume that this is all correctly validated with the chapter, that all these missing values are actually zeros, then you are, so if you made changes, then save it back to its original location, and that's fine. And then what you want to do is save as, and it needs to be saved as the 2003 version of Excel. So do save as, and you're going to save it to the default folder from the setup. So in this instance, the default folder was my documents, and I'm going to save it as upload. Okay, and save. Alright, and then you can close the document. Okay, once you've done that, you're going to go back to the database. So if that means opening it, or if you have it minimized, either way, you're going to come back to the database and you're going to click Import Initial Chapter Report. that is going to pull that upload file from your default folder and put the information in the locations in the database that is needed. You'll get a success when it's done, and click OK. All that data in that short period of time is now in the database for aggregation in the reports and so on and so forth. Okay, so now we've imported one of the 2 grants that we've entered for this year. So one thing that I'm going to show here is missing outcomes. So we have the year selected for this year, 2012, and I'm going to click missing outcomes. That is going to generate a report that shows contact information for the chapters that are in the system but have no grant information updated yet. So the chapter that we haven't updated is Santa Rosa, contact name, phone number, email, all of that's in the system, letting you know who you need to follow up with in order to get that information. Okay, so that's been done. We're going to come back, and again, to help prevent duplicating information, we just uploaded or imported Florins, so we're going to move that file to the imported folder so that this only ever includes chapters that have not yet been imported. Process is the same for Santa Rosa. We're going to open it up, go through our validation checks to make sure that everything looks good, save it back to its original location, and then save as, once again, to the default folder as upload. Okay. Now, from chapter to chapter, if you're doing these in iterations like this, quick iterations, then you can just overwrite the existing file. There's no need to save the upload version of each of the documents. So then you can close that and go back to your database and click Import Initial Chapter Report. It'll go through the same process and let you know that it was imported successfully. Again, make sure to go back to where you have the original stored and move that file to the imported. Now if we go back, you'll see that our missing outcomes report will be blank. So that is the end of the import for the database. That process can be repeated for all submitted documents. The one thing to keep in mind, however, is that if you protected the workbook as a whole, having pages protected is not an issue, but if the workbook itself was protected in your development process or in your creation process of the Excel files before you sent them to, or the Excel file before you sent it out to the chapters, you will need to unprotect the workbook. Otherwise you will get an error saying that it was not accessible. So pages can remain however they are, but the workbook itself as a whole must be unprotected.